Welcome to the Service MVP Podcast. This is where you go to learn how to use pure motive service to create higher value to grow your results. And now, here is your host, America's service sales coach, Joe Crisara.
Hello and welcome to the Service MVP Podcast. My name is Joe Crisara, America's service sales coach. And we have with us a very special guest who's going to do a very special podcast called, Chris, what is the name of it?
The Service of Handling Objections.
We have Chris Calamusa, our lead coach here at Service MVP, and he's going to go ahead and run this thing. I'm going to be the person being interviewed, and Chris is going to interview me. So Chris, go ahead and let's get started with this.
Yeah, let's get into it. Got a lot of good questions for you. To kind of just get the ball rolling here, can you just tell me a little bit about why do you feel like learning about handling objections is so crucial for sales success?
Well, I think, objections are really just barriers that stop us from getting to the end goal, which is to get the job done for people. And I really feel like the mission's not accomplished unless we actually get the work that we're trying to sell people to get that job done. And I don't look at objections as something that you're doing to people. I think it's something that we're doing for people, which is really the science of how to manage the project is the way I would put it. We're trying to get this thing, the selection phase, where you show people problems, you show them solutions, and then you help people with assisting them to make the right selection that's right for them and their family. So I don't look at it like it's something that's only self-centered. It's really truly a service that you're offering your clients.
Yeah. Why don't you give us some examples of objections that, somebody might experience out in the service industry?
Sometimes people would, just not be certain whether they have the right person or not. And I think it's like, say, you know what, I just need more time to think this whole thing over because right now it's between you and a different service provider. And I would say, well, let me help you with that. I mean, first of all, thank you for including me with the other service provider. I'm sure that the other person is a high professional. Well, let's go ahead and just do a little comparison. Let me help you with that. Like, for instance, our company gave you 6 choices to get the job done. How many choices did the other person provide? And they might say, he provided 1. Yeah, so right now we provided 5 times more choices than he did. So why did he not do that? Yeah, I can see the difference here now. I see that is different. Yeah, so what should we do? Oh yeah, let's just go ahead and get the job done because I can see you're more professional. So there's different things that you do. I think one of the things you could do in objection handling is just to remind people of the level of skill and competency that you're defining inside the process as opposed to your competition, which basically shortcuts a lot of the process.
Well, how would you distinguish between, a real objection versus, I guess, what you could call a smoke screen objection, something that's not quite a real objection?
Well, I think a real objection is when somebody says, no, I'm not going to use your company, or, we're not going to do it right now. We're going to hold off on the project for now. I'll call you back later sometime. So they're actually stopping the process and they're doing it now. A phony objection is where they just say something as a instinct or a reaction. Like if I said, well, here's the prices, and they go, oh my God, you got to sharpen your pencil. And I don't consider that an objection. I would say that's just something they said. That's a reaction, not an objection. So I would say to that, well, John, I already gave you my best price. So what should we do? If they said, I need to think about it, I don't really consider that an objection because nobody said no or not now. They just said they need to think about it. And so I would say something like, sure, Joe, take as much time as you need. I'll stay right here. What should we do again? Right that. So smoke screens or phony objections are just things that people blurt out like, you guys are expensive, or these prices are too high. They never said no. They never said not now. And therefore, there's no reason to handle an objection that isn't really an objection at all. It's just something where people are saying something. Your response to what they say is a key. You're going to let that stop you, or are you going to keep going? I guess that's the key question there.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what do you feel like is the psychology behind why people give objections in the first place? Like what's going on kind of on a little deeper level?
Well, I think there's just a lack of self-esteem on the part of the buyer. I think when people are certain in themselves or they have confidence in themselves, when you make a decision, people who are more decisive generally believe in themselves to where they think, well, even if I do pay too much, I'm strong enough to hold this guy's feet to the fire to make sure I get value. Sense? I think the majority of people, by the way, probably 90% of people have weak self-esteem. And so they're not sure if they make the right choice, if they're being taken advantage of, or they think they won't be able to get their money back, or they don't want to have to confront the service provider down the road with bad workmanship. So in a way, they're testing the service provider to see how strong they are so they can get through this process. Because I think by the most part, most consumers actually aren't sure. There is an uncertainty. But the uncertainty stems by their own self-esteem because they don't believe that they will be able to get value from the service provider. Because if you feel strongly that I don't care what I pay, I'm going to make sure I get value, that means you believe in yourself and your ability to get value from people. Makes sense?
Yeah.
I think when you're uncertain about whether you're going to be able to confront somebody, or what if there's a conflict, I won't be able to talk to this person again, I'll feel funny bringing up the price or whatever, that means there's a weakness there. I think that's the reason why I think most people lack the self-esteem to be decisive and make a firm decision. That's why I think pretty much 90% of all calls have some sort of small little barrier, whether it's a non-objection or an actual real objection. I think that's why we do at Service MVP what we do, which is to help people feel comfortable when they get to that destination of getting the work done.
Right. Okay. Well, let's actually talk about that and how we approach those objections. So what would you say is like the first thing that you do as a salesperson when you get hit with objection? Where do you start?
Well, the very first thing I like to do is give myself some time. I call the magic moment to start with. I always try to say, first of all, thank you for having interest in the service we're providing, or thanks for making the effort to share that with me. I know that sounds like you're hesitant, and that's great that you're sharing that with me. It makes me feel good that you're willing to share that with me, and I'm thankful that you have this opportunity. So by doing something like that, it gives me time to think about which avenue am I going to do or work with to try to get this person to that destination. Does that make sense? So number one, I do that. Number two, I try to ask myself, is it really an objection, or is it that smoke screen we talked about? If it's a smoke screen, I usually just sort of show my understanding and show my empathy. And then I say, I understand all that, but nonetheless, here's what it's going to take to get the job done. So what should we do? And let the client handle the objection in a way. But then there's sometimes where we have to literally demonstrate the difference in value. Like, for instance, somebody says, your prices are higher than the competitor I have seen. And I say, well, that may be true. Like I said before, how many options did he show you? Or when he showed you the options, did he focus on the equipment and materials, or did he focus on your family? And yeah, he focused on the equipment. Well, I'm focused on the equipment and your family. What good is the equipment without your family? And like, yeah, that's a good point there. Yeah, so what should we do? Would be a good way of handling an objection, right? Make sense there? So the bottom line is that I think the process is, number one, make a friend. Number two, is it a smokescreen or a real objection? Number three, there's really only a couple of different destinations. One destination is, what should we do? Let's get the job done. Another one is, if I could make some changes to this proposal in a way, what would happen then, right? Or I could say, there's 6 options. Let's get rid of some of these and get down to the one we want. Or somebody likes one or asks a question, I would say, why do you like that one? Would be a thing I would ask them too. So there's 4 different destinations once it is an actual objection that I know I'm going to. It's just a matter of how am I going to get there.
Yeah. Okay. So it seems like it's very important to be an active listener. So when it comes to like active listening, trying to decipher these objections, what path do I go down? Like, what does that actually look like?
Yeah, that's a good point there, Chris. I think, and it's a challenge I even have because I do a lot of talking and speaking, and listening is one of the things I have to constantly work on. And I'm not a finished product by any means in that area. I am challenged all the time to be a better listener. But you're right. You have to listen for body language. Listen for facial expressions with your eyes. You have to listen with your ears. Sometimes I see things like school books on top of a kitchen table, and I'll say, yeah, these people value education of their child. And I don't have to hear it or see it on the expression, but I can see that people love to help their kids with their homework. So there's certain things that you can see that are hidden in plain sight that we can make comments on to kind of give us the value system of our clients. Because once we understand our clients, I think it's easier to get to the destination and help them get to where they're supposed to go.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So I think one of the things that people struggle with a lot when it comes to handling objections is they feel like they sound defensive. So it makes them a little uncomfortable. So what advice or what kind of direction can you give people that might be feeling a little bit defensive when handling objections?
Well, I just give you a short answer, and I hope this helps everybody. I would say that whenever you feel anxiety and you feel pressure or you feel stress and you feel like you're starting to get defensive or you want to say something as a comeback that's too quick, just try to remember that whenever you get anxiety or stress or frustration, most likely you're making the process too much about yourself and you're not focused on helping the client get to where they're supposed to go. Make sense? So this process is not about what you're going to get from it. It's about what is the client going to get from it. I mean, sure, there is a financial obligation to get the job done. I'm not going to hide that. We're going to show people the prices. Of course, we could make it financeable so the prices are less money so that people can afford it better. But there is ultimately a financial obligation, and that's not going to go away. My job, I look at it as a service provider, is help people see the value in me managing the project to make sure the family is taken care of. That's really what the end result is. So I would say, just remember, whenever you feel anxiety, pressure, or stress, most likely you're making it too much about yourself. Like, for instance, Chris, if I were to say, how can we get your wife, Laura, involved? And then the client's like, why? Are you just trying to sell us? And I would say, no, I just want to make sure that Laura has equal access to the information. That's why I'm asking you. He goes, oh, okay. Yeah, she can be home tonight at 5:00. We can call her right now on the phone. Okay, so what should we do? Yeah, let's give her a call. So once the client knows the motivation behind, which is a client-focused motivation, then there's no pressure on me because when I'm trying to serve somebody, there's never pressure on me. Make sense?
Yeah.
I've never served anybody at my church or at my community, helping at Boy Scouts or whatever. I never felt pressure helping people. Does that make sense? The pressure comes from when I'm trying to take something from somebody. And I think that if we feel that defensiveness, that we're probably leaning into trying to get something from somebody rather than trying to provide value or giving them something. Does that make sense, Chris?
Yeah, totally. Okay. So let's talk about like specific techniques when it comes to objection handling. Where does storytelling come into play with handling objections?
Well, I think a good story can fortify the point you're trying to make, and I think a story about a third party helps kind of with that social validation element of things. And I have used many stories, like when people would ask me about, is there anything you do to lower the price? And I said, well, I had that same question by one of my clients who was in the next town over, and I did actually lower the price. What happened is that we didn't have enough resources to get the job done right, and it turned into an unhappy customer. So my question is, do you want this job to be done right where you paid enough money to get the job done right? Or what do you want us to cut corners on instead? And they might say, well, I don't want to cut corners on anything. And I say, I don't either. That's why we need the money to get the job done the way it is. So what should we do? Right? So that's kind of like what I would say there. So stories can interject, the failures that other clients have done, but also some successes that other clients have done. Yeah, like we did this at this other house down the street. Every room has the same temperature. As a matter of fact, we can call her right now if you want to, and she could tell the story herself. I think the best way to do it is let the client tell the story of that rather than just third parties on that. But it can help, honestly.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Still diving into more of the specific stuff, the use of questions seems to be like a core to handling objections. So why is that questions are really kind of at the forefront?
That's a really good question, Chris. Well, questions continue the opportunity because you're giving the other person a chance to weigh in and check in. Statements, when you try to preach things to people or teach things to people, it more or less ends the opportunity because in a way you said the last word and then the client just sits there like, oh, okay, like, am I going to disagree with that or not? So it kind of lends to either agreement or disagreement when I state things. However, I'm not really learning whether you are in agreement or not. Makes sense? So by asking questions, we get what's called voluntary commitment, Chris, by making sure that people have a chance to commit. Like I'll do a thing where sometimes people will say, I'm just looking for a price on a new furnace or a new water heater or a new electrical panel. And I'll say something like, is there a reason why we need to get the electrical panel or furnace or water heater? Why don't we just keep the old one? And that kind of forces the client to weigh in. Well, no, we can't hold off on it. We need to get this done because my other one is not keeping up with the hot water, or the panel keeps flickering the lights, or I'm getting a new hot tub and I got this anniversary gift for my wife and we need to get this thing done, or my family is cold in the winter time in that second floor. We need to get this work done. The other furnace doesn't work at all. So we need to get this thing up and running. So in a way, the client has a chance to weigh in with that. And I think one of the parts that is a challenge though, Chris, by asking questions, it kind of makes you feel like, does this sound like I'm stupid, or am I sound like a dummy when I ask this question? And here's my advice about that is that I say release your need to be accepted. When you are doing service for other people, this is not about the way you look or about getting your needs met. So if you want to get your needs met, do that at home with your wife and your children. Don't do that here at the job. The job is a place we go to get a return on investment for our family so we can afford to have the resources our family needs. So I would say your ego is not your amigo. And there's a thing called the dummy curve, right? The better questions you ask, even if they sound stupid, the more you're going to wind up selling, because the client sold themselves in a way, Chris, by asking the right question. I think that's the key item. When you ask the right question, you're going to get the right answer, which is allowing the clients to sell themselves. And this way you don't have to sell anybody or push anybody. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. Okay. So thinking about, people who are new to really thinking about how to handle objections, doing it in the best way, when they're learning, it might be a little bit of a struggle to have the confidence, to have the courage to kind of say some of these things. So what advice would you have for somebody that is struggling with confidence? Like, where can they kind of start to build that?
I really think that this thing that we teach at Service MVP called the pure motives are a key to confidence, because these are things that are very simple, but give people something to believe in. So when you're handling objections and you're basing your energy on giving people the pure motives, I think that always gives confidence. So if I would say the pure motives are quality of the solution, the reliability of a solution, the safety of a family or the health of somebody in the family, or the customer service that we provide to get the job done, and then to also cover the repairs or replacements into the future, the energy it takes to do all that. If you believe in those things, if you believe in customized, relevant solutions, if you believe in honesty, even when it's not popular, then you're not going to have a hard time telling people problems because you believe in honesty. And in a way, the pure motives, Chris, are decisions we've already made that this is what I believe in before I go on every call. So if I believe in the highest quality and reliability, I'm not going to have a hard time trying to explain, here is the most highest quality repair or the highest quality air quality or water quality we could do for you, even if it's more money, right? So I always say money's not my master. If you believe in that I'm not going to be focused on money, I'm going to focus on the family, I'm going to focus on quality, reliability, safety, health, customer service, customized relevant solutions, and honesty, even when it's not popular. If those are things that are in your heart and you are sitting in the truck and before every call you say, I don't know what's going to happen in there, but I do know that I am going to find the best quality and reliable solution to get this job done. I'm also going to find the best safety and health for this family. And that's not negotiable. Those pure motives are not negotiable, Chris. One of the Joe-isms, right? I said, we all put our pants on one leg at a time. The only difference between you and me, I tell some people, is that I've already decided I'm going to use pure motives when I do my job today. I don't think you have any firm foundation right now at this point. So I'm here to teach you how to stand on those firm foundations of pure motives so that you may not be confident in yourself, but you are confident that I believe in these things and that I'm going to make sure that all my actions are going to match up with the pure motives. And I think if you do that, there's no pressure because you've already decided ahead of time before you woke up and put those pants on one leg at a time. That's what you're going to do. Make sense?
Yeah, totally. Okay. Now, same topic of kind of like building these skills and getting good at it. Do you feel like role playing helps? Do you feel like it's a waste of time?
Well, role playing is just like basketball. It's like basketball or baseball. You have to practice and it takes repetition, right? If you want to see a championship team or those players like Steph Curry in the NBA, who can hit a shot from basically half court. He can cross over half court without even looking at the basket. He just flicks his wrist, and the ball the net doesn't even move. The ball goes through the basket so cleanly. And you're like, how does somebody get that good? Well, obviously, that guy, it wasn't the first time he took a shot from that part of the court. And I would say if you did a heat map of all the places that Steph Curry has practiced taking shots on a basketball court, pretty much on his side of the court, you would have everything would be red. You would probably have 1,000 or 10,000 shots from every single part of the court. And the reason he's so good when he's in a game is that it's already familiar that I cross 5 feet over the half court line, I flick my wrist and I score. And it's like, yeah, I just thought I'd make it easy this time instead of having to set it up, because I hit that one about 70% of the time. So he already knows it'll be a 70% shot. He knows that a layup would be 100% for him, that type of thing. But he figures, we're already up by 20 points. Why don't I just shoot a 70? I'll shoot a 70%er.
Yeah.
And he knows it, right? So I think the repetition, if you're going to master something, somebody said you have to do it 10,000 times before you become an expert or a master at it. I'd say. So I think that role play is a element that is like batting practice in baseball or shooting free throws in basketball or whatnot.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So we're talking a lot about what to do, how to do it right, but what can you do wrong? Like, what are the mistakes that you see a lot of people make? So that way we can learn to avoid those mistakes.
Sales is an emotional thing for the people who purchase, because like when you're purchasing something for your heating system or hot water or your electrical, this is something that you're taking care of your family. And you don't want to let down your wife or your kids when you're making a decision, or your husband or your parents or whatever. If they're going to be visiting this house, you want to make sure that they're taken care of. And I think that's an emotional decision that people make. But I think for the seller or the person who's providing service, I don't really think it is an emotional thing. I think we should be good at learning the emotions and interpreting the emotions of our clients. But this is not an emotional process for us. We're just trying to manage the project to get the job done. Make sense? And even when people throw emotional things at you, it's good to be empathetic about those things, but still, you can take a little exit ramp if you want to show some empathy. But eventually, you got to get back on the highway, which is getting the job done. So I think that's the thing we got to remember, that the destination, anything else that takes us off that where we become emotional, takes us away from it. Because then we feel hurt, or we feel damaged, or we feel like this guy doesn't see my value in a way, right? You start getting that defensiveness you talked about before.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you've seen a ton of objections over the years. You've probably heard from other people a ton of objections. I'm sure they vary from easier to handle. Some are a little bit harder to handle. But what is like the hardest objection that you've ever seen? Like, what is the one that you're like, oh man, this one keeps me up at night thinking about it? Is there one in particular that you could think of?
No, because I hate to say the word no, because I don't believe in that word, as you could probably tell. But truthfully, I've seen things that look like we're just about to sell the job and looks so easy, we're so close, and then it never gets sold, it never gets done. And I've seen ones that seem like this job's not going to go anywhere, and then just like one thing, it turned like one question, and all of a sudden they're making a purchase. So I wish I had an answer to say one thing is harder than the other. Truthfully, I think it is how committed are people to a dysfunctional path that they currently are on. Like if somebody invites a service provider out to get hot water for their family, and they're presenting all kinds of reasons why we shouldn't get hot water for the family, then there's some people who are more committed to looking like they're controlling things than they are in getting hot water. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think there's about 8% of the population that no matter what objection they bring you, they're just committed to getting prices and not getting the job done. But good news is there's 92% of the population that wants to get the job done. They didn't come out here to waste time and not get the work done. Now, of that 92%, I would say there's about 46% that are very easy to move forward, just like by making a suggestion, like, what should we do? A question like, here's the price of what should we do? Yeah, let's do the top one or whatever, right? And then there's the other 46% who need that nurturing and explaining or educating them to get to see the value of the solution, right? So I think that is done by speaking in an emotional way, but not being emotional yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. On that subject, how do you balance being persistent with kind of just knowing when to walk away from it? you know?
I don't really feel there's any time to walk away from anything.
Yeah.
I don't quit, right? So listen, when I was in business in 1991, my company was a mess. And, even Service MVP, it's had different periods where it seemed like an insurmountable mess. And I'm like, I'm not quitting. I'm still coming in at the same time every day. And the only thing I would say, my leadership at Service MVP, is that I show up every day. People are like, I'm going to work from home. I'm like, that's okay. You work from home. I'm still going to be here. And it's like, that's like, well, I better go there because Joe's going to be there, because at least I know he'll be there today. But that's part of it, right? It says, I think if you're a quitter, that you quit when times get tough. I think that's what I would say objections really represent. And I think it's a demonstration to the client. Like, if it's hard to get the job done up in that attic or down in that crawl space, and it's going to be tough to get this job done, if this guy can't even handle these objections, how's he supposed to be in the crawl space and get that job done? Right. So I really feel that's an element of a demonstration. By the ability to handle objections isn't just a technique, it's a showpiece that shows clients that I'm not going to quit when times get tough. So I really don't feel like there's any time where I walk away. Now, I do give the clients many chances of their own. I can say, well, if you want to get the job done, I can stay here today and get the job done. If you want to hire somebody else, you're free to tell me to go away. If you want to tell me to go away, would be a question I would ask. And they'd say, no, I like you. Well, I like you too. So what should we do? Let's get the job done, like that, right? So that's kind of what I would say, is that there's never any time where a service provider should walk away. However, I would say we can give the client the choice to stop or continue. And the good news for me is that almost everybody continues because they do want to get the job done, even the dysfunctional people who act like they don't.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Okay. Some final takeaways here. We've learned a lot. I mean, handling objections, very dense subject, but if you had just one single piece of advice to give to someone that's really trying to get better at handling objections, what would that one piece of advice be?
Like I said before, it's like a highway where getting the job done is the final destination. You can take little exit ramps and do things that are not moving horizontal, not getting the job done. But eventually, we have to get ourselves back on the path, because a professional knows that your job is to illuminate the path to get the job done and get the work done. And my advice would be adopt the peer motives, learn the peer motives so that you have a confidence and fundamental belief in that what you're providing is the right thing and you won't quit. Or you're not going to give up on a client just because they are dysfunctional. Because if I quit when I had a client who was in front of me who was dysfunctional, I wouldn't have any clients, because everyone is dysfunctional, including myself. I mean, I'm the first example of what's dysfunctional. So I don't quit on myself. I'm not going to quit on you or my clients either. Make sense?
Yeah, love that. Okay. Do you have any recommendations for like maybe books or even like an exercise somebody could do? Just any resources in general?
Well, Chris, I would say this book right here, I would say that would be the thing you could try first. You could get a hard copy, or you could get an audible of this book, and I'd be happy to give it to you for free to make sure that you get value before you even spend a penny. I mean, I'd be happy to give people what's in this book right here, both on book or audio. I'd be happy to give you a copy. Just pay for shipping and handling, or I'll give you an audible if you want to. Just let us know. Go to Service MVP and hit the chat button, and you'll be able to get this for free if you want to. Our job is to make sure you get value before we even make a penny. That's what we're trying to do. Tell you one thing, Chris, you and I both agree on one thing, is that we want people to stay ahead of the value curve. We don't want to feel like we're taking anything from people. We want to feel like they owe us something, right, Chris?
Yeah.
Like we provided enough value that they feel like we should actually be charging more for the service, makes sense? So it does start out at a very low cost. Then you want to know more, you want to master it. Then if you want to use our time and our services, that is going to be an investment. But, so this is not about making money right now. It's about showing people, in my heart and your heart too, about just helping people succeed.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, thank you so much for hanging out, talking about all this, trying to help everybody. I think this was very helpful for them. So appreciate the time. And
thank you for being a great co-host. Yes, I really appreciate it. All right, everybody. We'll see you again on the next Service MVP podcast. Have a great one, everybody.